spaceship, which is on course for an 8-week tour around Mars and Saturn. Owned by an eccentric billionaire, Herman Judd, the spaceship is currently occupied by more than 5,000 rich passengers, all of whom want a glimpse of the solar system. The space crew of Avenue 5 is believed to be the best in the world, and it is led by the experienced American captain, Ryan Clark. Avenue 5 also has an impenetrable shield which protects the passengers from harmful radiation, and has an abundant supply of oxygen which can last for up to 3 years. However, one day, because of a stupid error, the fate of the 5,000 passengers hangs by a thread. The owner Judd, who is known for being childish, wants to set a record by having the largest yoga class in space, so he asks nearly 1,000 passengers to come to the ship's port and perform yoga. This overloads the port area, and the ship starts malfunctioning. There's a warning sign in the control room, but when an engineer, Billy, ignores it, the ship experiences something called a gravity flip. I thought Tony Hawk invented that. Because of this, all the passengers are thrown from their feet and launched at one side of the spaceship. Chaos ensues as many of them are seriously injured by the falling debris. This goes on for minutes, but the engineer from earlier, Billy, finally manages to bring the situation under control by pulling a lever. At last, the ship regains its gravity, but another engineer named Joe, who is repairing something outside, gets killed. In the aftermath, Captain Clark makes an announcement and tells everyone to be calm. He also promises that the shake was only a minor inconvenience and that the situation is under control. However, little did he realize what was about to befall him and the Avenue 5. After the announcement, Clark keeps trying to contact the engineer Joe, oblivious to the fact that he's already dead. Just then, Billy approaches him and reveals some shocking news. At first, she mentions that the spaceship is going to experience a knock-on effect due to the 5,000 people smashing into one side of the ship. Then she reveals that the engineer Joe died as a result of the gravity flip. Hearing this, Clark is taken aback, and he leaves the scene in anger. On Earth, at the Judd Galaxy headquarters, the control room watches everything unfold in horror. The mission chief, Rav Mukler, conducts a scan of the spaceship and gets devastating news. Because of the knock-on effect, the Avenue 5 has missed its trajectory, and going back is not an option. This means that its previous 8-week journey has now been extended into a 3-year one. Rav calls Judd, his assistant Iris, and the others to the meeting room, and reveals the news, which obviously shatters them. In the heat of the moment, Captain Clark starts blabbering in a British accent.
I've said this over and over again. What the hell just happened with your voice?
Yeah, what the hell?
Everyone is shocked to hear this, as they had assumed he was American. This is when Clark finally comes clean. He reveals that he is just a British actor who was hired to motivate the crew and the passengers with his brilliant speeches. This means that he has no idea on how to operate a spaceship, and all the stories about his gallantry in space were lies.
Oh, that makes sense. Oh my God.
Are you an admiral?
Hearing this, Judd and the others are furious, and they inquire about who the real captain is. With a soft voice, Clark responds that it was Joe, the engineer who died recently. Joe is also the person who hired him because he apparently had weak social skills. In the next scene, Clark, who is still a decorated hero for the passengers, along with the engineer Billy, make an announcement in front of everyone. They reveal that the Avenue 5 is skidded off course, and now it may take around 3 years for them to return home. Nonetheless, Captain Clark assures them that the engineers are working day and night to secure a safe passage, and that they are completely out of danger. A nosy passenger, Karen, demands more answers, and Clark promises to explain everything in detail, but only after they give engineer Joe a proper send-off. Since the spaceship didn't expect any disasters, the authorities didn't load it with any coffins, but surprisingly, the egoistic Judd has brought one along with him, which is made up of solid gold. His assistant Iris requests he donate it for Joe's funeral, to which he reluctantly agrees. Later, as Clark is pretending to guide the ship in the control room, an engineer in shorts named Cyrus arrives with a tablet and reveals that he has found a shorter route to Earth. According to his calculations, they may return home in just 6 months. Elated, Clark shares the news with Judd, and the latter immediately orders him to reveal this information to the passengers. But Billy is against this. She suggests that they give the calculation a few tests, as Cyrus is known for exaggerating things. Unfortunately, Clark has already disclosed the information to the chatterbox, Karen, who in turn has told it to everyone. Oh, Karen. Later, during engineer Joe's funeral ceremony, Billy approaches Clark and warns him that that the coffin is too heavy and might cause problems, but he shrugs her off. After a while, the coffin is launched into space, but due to its sheer weight, it starts rotating the spaceship's orbit. Now, Engineer Joe's coffin will be accompanying them everywhere they go. Elsewhere on Earth, the mission chief, Rav, is holding a meeting with NASA to convince them for a rescue mission. Shortly after, Rav calls Judd and asks him to explain the terrifying situation on board the Avenue 5. The plan is to gain sympathy from NASA and start the rescue mission as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the arrogant Judd asserts that his team has already found a solution, with the help of which they will return in just 6 months. He then swears at NASA and tells them to frick off before ending the transmission. The same day, things go from bad to worse. 3 passengers who were severely injured during the knockoff disaster from earlier pass away. This time, Billy designs the coffins herself and makes them extra light and transparent so that they don't orbit the spaceship. The funeral ceremony goes as usual, but just as they are about to launch the coffins, Rav momentarily lowers the gravitational pull inside the spaceship. This doesn't send the passengers crashing like before, but nonetheless, they float in the air for a while. As for the coffins, they don't get enough power for the launch and get sent outside slowly. Now they also orbit Avenue 9 along with Joe's gold coffin. The only difference is that since these 3 coffins are transparent, the corpses are clearly visible. The following day, Clark heads to the dining room where he notices Karen's influence increasing among the passengers. He also notices that the current head of customer relations, Matt Spencer, is only adding fuel to the existing problems. Hence, he decides to invite Karen to his office for a meeting that will benefit them both. Later, the two chat about the current affairs over a glass of wine. Karens love wine. Unfortunately, even this time, Clark gets carried away and starts speaking in a British accent.
Tickle my ring piece. That is absolutely exquisite.
When his cover is blown, he eventually comes clean and reveals that he is not a captain. As expected, this enrages Karen, and she threatens to inform all the passengers about it. But Clark calms her down and offers her the role of the senior liaison officer. Her role will be to chat with clients and convince them that they are totally safe and will return home in no time. Karen is still skeptical, but Clark ultimately changes her mind by giving her his presidential suite. After a while, as Clark is walking through the hallway, the engineer from earlier, Cyrus, approaches him with some bad news. He reveals that he miscalculated the weight of the spaceship the last time, so his assumption of 6-month return was wrong. Now the original return back time is a 6-month addition to the existing 3 years that was predicted earlier. This means that it will take 3.5 years for Avenue 5 to return to Earth. However, there is one way to reduce the weight and hence the duration. If they are somehow able to chuck around 500 passengers into space, then they could orbit faster. But as expected, Clark immediately rejects the idea and walks away. Later, he meets the new liaison officer Karen and briefs her about the situation. He then orders her to announce this to the crew in the calmest way possible, so that they don't cause a riot. Karen obliges and comes up with an emotional story which makes the crowd erupt into applause, even after she reveals that they will return home in 3.5 years.
3.5 years, people! Boom!
Meanwhile, Clark decides to take matters into his own hands. He heads to the spaceship control room and asks the engineers for new updates, but surprisingly, all of them repeat the same answers, as if they have it memorized. This is when Cyrus arrives and reveals that all the engineers here are actually paid actors too. They were hired by Judd to impress the passengers with their good looks. Hearing all this, Clark becomes furious and starts screaming in British again.
How could you not know?
Hence blowing his cover in front of all the actors. After he's done with his outburst, Billy removes the carpet and opens a small door that leads to a cramped up basement. There, several people are seen working with computers. Billy reveals that they are actually the real engineers of the spaceship. She and Cyrus are also a part of their team and have been working under the radar since the first day. The revelation plunges Clark into an even further abyss of confusion, and he starts wondering if there's anything real in Avenue 5. In the next scene, he heads to the basement and socializes with the guys over a couple of beers. To his surprise, they seem to be chill people who are still smiling and happy despite the grim situation they are in. Such is the power of beer. Later, Judd organizes a party in his suite to lighten up the mood. Karen, Clark, and Iris also join him, and the four start brainstorming ideas to come up with a PR strategy. They want to let the people back on Earth know that they are safe and are living a comfortable life. Clark and Iris come up with intellectual plans, but Judd, being Judd, rejects every one of them and proposes that they take a picture with the kids near the wetsuit spacesuit compartment. This compartment has the best view to space, and it is also the shield that protects the spaceship from harmful radiation. What are the components of the shield? Well, it is just human excrement. Wasting no time, hundreds of passengers, mostly kids, head to the area for the perfect picture. To make the scene even more believable, Judd requests someone come up and press a random button. Karen's wife Frank volunteers and does the job. Unfortunately, at the exact same time, they pass through a random star whose gravitational pull ruptures the turd shield. This causes the human excrement to come out at an alarming rate. Now, if it is not stopped urgently, the oxygen level will deplete and kill everyone. Since the passengers still regard Captain Clark as a hero, they encourage him to get out and fix the problem. Left with no option, he reluctantly agrees. With this, the engineers fit him into a spacesuit, gear him up with a comm, and send him out of the spaceship. As the passengers inside Avenue 5 and the rest of the world watch closely, Clark keeps floating irregularly because he of course has no expertise in this area. Nonetheless, with the help of some instructions from the engineers, he reaches the spot where the turd shield has ruptured. Now, all he has to do is rotate the lever and stop the overflow. But the task is not an easy one, as the lever is jammed shut, and the force in which the excrement is coming out is exerting a lot of pressure. Fortunately, Billy also arrives there, and the two together manage to close the lever, hence stopping the overflow. The whole world erupts into cheers, and Captain Clark becomes an overnight sensation, much to the annoyance of Billy, who is also equally helpful. In this way, the catastrophe is averted, but the human excrement, which was launched into space, now has started orbiting the spaceship as well. That evening, Avenue 5 was supposed to host a midway home party, which would commemorate the end of their 4th week in space. However, since they're staying for the next 3.5 years, and the resources for the party are already booked, they decide to have a 1/45th of the way home party. A stand-up comedian named Jordan is brought on stage to lighten up the mood, but all his jokes are either lame or the crowd interrupts him. Karen's husband Frank, who is amongst the crowd, is receiving threats from his fellow passengers, as they believe that him pressing the button caused the entire poop incident. They demand he be thrown out of the spaceship, and Judd, in a drunken state, also starts supporting them. Soon, some security officers arrive and forcefully take Frank away. It appears as if they are really going to throw him out of the spaceship. Karen desperately tells Judd not to do it, but he doesn't listen. Fortunately, before Frank can be terminated, Clark, who is now a very respected man, gets on stage and urges the crowd to remain calm. He then makes them understand that it was not Frank who caused the incident, but the gravitational pull of a nearby star. Saying this, he urges Judd to bring Frank back, and the latter agrees. Soon, Frank is released from custody, but instead of thanking Clark, he punches him straight in the jaw. It turns out that he has started suspecting the captain of sleeping with his wife, as they are always together. Meanwhile, on Earth, Rav watches footage of the party and becomes hopeful that the people will make it out alive. The episode